Joining me now is CBSN contributor Leslie Sanchez. Leslie, great to see you.
No, thank you.
So let's talk first about the thing that everybody is sort of quietly murmuring about in the halls of Congress, which is the president's budget, which came out yesterday, which aims not to touch entitlement programs, including Social Security and Medicare. This is a sea change as far as Republican orthodoxy. What are you hearing about how congressional Republicans feel about it?
Sure. I mean, they were cautiously optimistic. They were looking for details. But if you think about that, has really been the anchor of Speaker Ryan's reforms and budget reforms, is looking at modernizing and fixing efficiencies within the entitlement programs. And they basically say you cannot close the gap, especially if you're looking for a massive defense increase without offsetting that on some entitlements. So the Freedom Caucus is really going to be where the big rub is when you look at the Republican conference. Can they come together and find there's just not enough dollars there without looking at the bigger program?
Yeah, it's 60% of our overall federal spending. The math doesn't work, right? The question is, who is the emissary to carry that message back to the Trump White House?
I certainly think, number one, you have the Freedom Caucus. You have the Speaker. You're going to look for support, and they are thinking among the Senate leadership to basically, we have the tone is, we have a Republican president. We'll figure out the details.
Right.
But if there is a lockbox, not to use, bring back to Al Gore, protecting certain entitlement programs, we're going to have some real challenges getting to that number. But the difference and unique approach about President Trump is he's a businessman. He likes to get into the details. If a strong enough case can be made and look at just modernization of some of these antiquated systems, it seems like he'd be reasonable on those. And that's where these legislators are hoping to go.
Do you think, you talk about this president wanting to get into the details. On health care, though, he hasn't seemed as excited to get into the policy-making details of repealing and replacing Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. Do you foresee more legislative leadership from this White House, or do you think Congress is really going to be driving the bus?
He's leaving. He basically, that was a nice package that he put in front of congressional leaders and said, you guys go figure it out. I want to make that a priority. All of the political capital is going to border enforcement, immigration, this defense increase in spending, and jobs. That's it, which is really causing a bit of frustration among Republican leaders because that doesn't leave them a lot of room. Where are they on tax reform, on replacing Obamacare? Those are the big issues that now they have to grapple with, but they're not going to get that populist movement or kind of the lift that they need from Donald Trump to get it done.
Which is potentially an issue for them, right? I mean, we're talking about they have an election in 2018. Seats are going to be up for grabs. From what I've understood, the Republicans in the House say, listen, if we're going to do this, we need some cover from the White House. Thus far, I don't know how much cover they've been guaranteed.
Sure. We're not going to hear a lot of soaring oratory tonight. I think you're going to get back to the basics, like we talked about, building that wall. I'm hearing today about, eminent domain. The president's going to be looking at technology, but he is not above and beyond using whatever it takes, is what I'm hearing, to get that wall done at a rapid speed. And that causes a little bit of hand-wringing about Republicans who are used to a cadence, a style of being brought into the process. That is not how this is going to go. It's a very different, unique, new script. For the next 6 months, they can expect a lot of this type of disruption.
Eminent domain is something this president loves. He was a real estate developer in New York. He knows the phrase well. Let me ask you, Leslie, rhetorically speaking, this president is speaking to the entire nation, but at the same time, in landmark speeches, he's tended to speak directly to his base.
Sure.
Do you feel like he widens the lens in this speech, or does he go where he knows his bread is buttered?
Sure, absolutely. He is leading a nationalist populist movement, and that is not going to change. That is directly who he's speaking to when he's looking at that camera. He needs and has acknowledged, as a kind of political neophyte, that he needs these two chambers to come together and support his agenda. But unless the Democrats are successful at splitting the Republican conference, right, on some of these issues about how do we pay for it, he's going to be successful in moving through some of the key areas on defense, hopefully most of it, on jobs, and on the wall. And really, that is where his focus is. So he's going to continue what works in this kind of very aggressive approach in 2 or 3 key areas.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it, basically. You talk about splitting the Republican caucus. Do you think at this point it's possible for this president, any Republican, to split the Democratic caucus? Because certainly if any of this legislation is going to get passed, you're going to need some Democratic votes in the Senate.
I think what the reality is if you start looking at some of the internal numbers, Gallup, for example, you're going to see there's that baseline of support, which is why the president won, among working class Democrats. And this is a part of a realignment that are really in sync with the president's message on jobs and certainly immigration and defense. So it's going to be much more difficult for Democrats than they possibly think.
Last question. This is my betting question of the evening. How long do you think this speech is going to be?
Very long.
You do think it's going to be longer?
I actually do. I do. Well, you know, we heard some long ones. I think it'll be past the 45-minute mark.
All right. You're on record, Leslie.
There you go. Let's go. I'm rolling with it.
All right.
I'm going strong.
CBS contributor Leslie Sanchez. Great to see you, Leslie. Back over to you, Rena and Errol.